Infinite Emptiness, Life Without Shape. The stories by Shri, Rajeev Shantaram,
Thatte.
Beyond Words. When I was a child, my father's government job meant that we moved from one corner of Maharashtra to another. He was a man of integrity, so principled that even while working in a government service, the lure of money never tempted him. Consequently, our relocations were frequent. Every 6 months or every year, we would prepare to set off for a new village. In each new place, we were allotted government quarters. Sometimes fine, sometimes not so much, sometimes small, sometimes large. There were occasions when electricity was absent altogether, and all household affairs had to be managed by the flicker of a kerosene lamp. Despite the varied conditions of our homes, every house boasted its own garden. And I adored those gardens. They were adorned with roses, jasmine, mogra, and aboli, each bloom brightening the morning. I was particularly fond of the Chinese rose. Whenever we reached a new village, I would procure a small cutting of it and plant it in the ground. In just 10 or 15 days, around 10 in the morning, the rose would burst into bloom with its pinkish red, tender flowers. Counting how many blossoms appeared each day became my little joy. Time passed, and I eventually came to Mumbai for my business, settling in a modest block within a housing board building. In Mumbai, however, there was no ground to speak of in front of the building, only a paved road. As a result, both the sight of trees and the act of planting them had all but vanished. Yet whenever I could, I would take my family on outings to the Konkan or Matharan during holidays, where for a few days, conversations would spark with my beloved fruit trees once more. Life would once again brim with joy, and the soul would be refreshed. While living in that old block, I learned about a new row house complex being developed in Thane. One evening, I went with my family to check it out. When we arrived at the row house complex, I was struck by surprise. The entire area was dominated by ancient, majestic trees, cashew, mango, and jackfruit trees that were over 70 years old. Though massive in size, their brilliant green leaves were utterly captivating. In the midst of these grand trees, a small row house had been built, complete with a verdant lawn, a little ornamental pond, and again, hundreds of flowering shrubs in shades of pink, red, yellow, blue, gold, orange, white, and purple, thousands of blossoms adorning the trees. Every new variety of tree sported flowers in unique hues, and even those of the same species varied in subtle shades. I was utterly enchanted by the garden. Every row house was accompanied by a small garden, and additional land was available for planting new trees. Behind each house lay a vast field, so abundant with varied flora that it felt as though one were wandering in a forest. I chose a row house. We all went out onto the terrace to survey our new surroundings. In the field behind the house, I saw many trees. But attached to the row house, there was one anomaly, a dried-up karanja tree, tall and full of branches, yet completely bereft of leaves. I wondered in amazement how, amidst all the lush greenery around it, that one tree remained entirely barren. As dusk approached, Birds began returning to the trees. Their chirps and twittering were utterly enchanting. I had never heard the call of the koel in Mumbai. But here, 5 or 6 koels exchanged melodious greetings. I even spied a kingfisher and a mongoose-like creature that, in that fleeting hour, seemed to bestow its blessing. Although I had decided to make this row house my home, one question lingered in my mind. How could that single tree remain leafless? A few months later, we moved into a new row house. We transplanted the potted trees from our old block in Mulund, along with their pots, into the new garden. Every morning, I took it upon myself to water the courtyard trees, and then the ones in the front and back gardens. Whether the trees were flowering ones, ornamental, or even fruit-bearing like a lemon tree, I delighted in watching them. Though the rule was simply water the roots, I would personally spray water onto each tree with a tube, cleaning them daily. In doing so, the trees seemed to smile at me, and my days began with pure delight. One day, I planted a jasmine sapling that I had brought from Mulund. I enriched its soil with fertilizer, and before long, the plant's growth surged dramatically. Day by day, a cascade of blossoms began to fall like rain. The entire bungalow soon became filled with their sweet fragrance. The jasmine vine, as it climbed, began to make the compound wall seem diminutive. Then, while contemplating where to train a creeper, I noticed the dried-up karanja tree from before, clinging to the wall of my yard. I fetched a tall stool and, using the jasmine vine's tendrils, gently tied them around a branch of the dried tree that stretched into my garden. It was jasmine season. Swiftly, the vine climbed the rope, spreading over the branches of the long dry tree. Soon, even the ascending tendrils were adorned with abundant blossoms. The entire courtyard was awash with fragrance. I learned from the gardener that the karanja tree had been dry for 7 long years. Thus, to train the jasmine vine, we used dried bamboo. Similarly, the dried tree was repurposed. One day, as I went out onto the terrace to savor the jasmine's aroma, I was astonished to find that the very branch on which the vine had clung was now bursting with new green shoots. Joy overwhelmed me. The one tree in our garden that had long been desolate was suddenly giving life to new leaves. Within a few days, the entire tree was cloaked in foliage. The jasmine vine, with its vivid green hue, now adorned the tree, climbing ever higher. Bathed in its fragrant company and the soft caress of blossoms, the karanja tree seemed to have come back to life. I excitedly shared this marvelous transformation with friends who visited me. They found my discovery that the grand, once dry tree had been revived by jasmine to be almost laughable. Yet I, gazing at the rejuvenated tree with tears of joy, savored it for an entire year. One evening, when I returned home, I noticed that the garden had been ravaged by heavy rain and a storm. In the rear, I saw that the jasmine vine had torn away from the karanja tree. My heart sunk. I called the gardener, who carefully trimmed and reattached the jasmine to the wall. But in the days that followed, the jasmine produced fewer blossoms. Its fragrance waned, and the karanja tree began to wither. Within 8 to 10 days, The Karanjar tree became entirely leafless. Even with ample rain, it continued to dry up. Each day, I gazed at the withering tree with a heavy heart. Then another storm arrived. I feared that the tree might fall and bring down the garden wall. I tried nourishing it with fertilizer, but the tree continued to deteriorate. One night, a torrential downpour and fierce winds battered the area. After a day of labor, I slept through the night. In the morning, as I ascended to the terrace, I discovered a vast empty space where the tree once stood. I realized, with profound sorrow, that the Karanjar tree had fallen sideways at the edge of the field, uprooted completely. I closed my eyes and offered it a silent farewell, a tribute from deep within. After 7 or 8 long years of dryness, with the jasmine wine's companionship finally severed, the tree had exhaled its final breath upon the earth. I looked at the jasmine vine then. Its leaves were withered. On its tendrils and leaves, droplets of water shimmered, a tearful tribute from the jasmine to its cherished partner.